these data brokers are the ones who are doing a lot of that centralization of the data. And I feel oftentimes, yeah, Wired has a really great article on this that kind of goes a little bit in the weeds on it, that based off of I think a Duke University study that they kind of extrapolated on. But these data brokers, I think most people think of, your typical internet giants, Google, Facebook, Amazon, as kind of like your mass hoarders of this information. And they don't realize that there's a whole secondary market outside of those three popular names that are doing this level of data collection, de-anonymization, aggregation of data from multiple sources. And they're often, I would say, kind of nameless companies or faceless companies. They have names, they're faceless. In terms of they kind of lurk in the background, and nobody really ever knows that they're existing. If you're lucky, you might spot some from like looking at the amount of trackers on a website, but even then they're pretty smart about how many domains they use and how they switch those up, so you don't actually know where the data is being sent to. It's just some random string of characters. But this Wired article goes through in detail. It talks about two of the bigger companies. I think LexisNexis is a big one, and basically they advertise that they have the ability to determine a person's current location using recent driver's license records. They can track. There was another one, Axiom, ACXIOM. And they say they do location-based user data. Need to know if someone visited a location multiple times in the past 30 days, like a church, a therapist office, or their ex's house. They've got you covered according to the company's marketing document. Just a wild amount of stuff that these guys collect and know exactly at a pinpoint level. And I think this infographic that Brent has up, I think it's from their marketing documents, or it's about them in general. But there's 4,000 of these companies around the world, and that could span between like major players versus minor players. But if one and a half of the 1,500 of the leading brands sell information from store loyalty cards. We talked about this a week or two ago, but like Kroger cards and CVS cards and any kind of loyalty card being additional pieces of information. But on the far right, one of the smaller points, data on 500 million customers worldwide, right? 3,000 data points per person, just like massive scale numbers, right? That completely go under the radar, and nobody would have ever heard of that company. Nobody would know. But these are the people who have all these data deals in place with these ISPs, with these smaller companies, and aggregate a lot of that information and create that, I would say, secondary market. And probably these are maybe Facebook, Amazon, and Google's really true biggest competitors, rather than we think that they compete with each other, but there's a whole second market that's out there trying to collect and hoard as much data as they can. And I believe the data brokers are the ones who have been, I guess, lobbying pretty hard about Google's Flock, because they're the ones that want to collect the data, and they think if Google turns on the Flock, then that basically will solidify Google's position in terms of the data that they have, and not allow the data brokers to collect as much as they want to. So it's a I would say a nasty web of stuff going on there. But what did you guys kind of get out of this Wired article? And then I know there's a lot more on the topic of data brokers in general. Probably a solid couple deep dives of episodes, just because there's so much that they do, and ultimately all the topics we talked about, I think, feed into this data broker topic in general.
I mean, if you look at that graphic, right, 3,000 data points per person.
That's what I was
Do this exercise and list out the data points about yourself. I don't
know that many data points about myself, man. I mean, they got 3,000. I could maybe name like 100. This is amazing that they have all this information on us, more than we know about ourselves. That's scary.
That's exactly the point. And we have touched on the pay stub information in the past, right? 38% of employed Americans' information, pay stub information, is with Equifax. Again, all of these are extremely scary. Now, if you look at the data brokers on one side, and then Google, Facebook, and whatnot, I see Google, Facebook, and all Amazon, Twitter, all these companies as vertical integrators. They have the data part just as much as the data brokers. In fact, the data brokers will be happily selling their information to these companies, and I'm sure there are seamless flow. It may not be bidirectionally, but there's a flow there between the data brokers and these surveillance companies. And make no mistake, the surveillance companies themselves are data brokers, right? And actually, all of them are the surveillance companies, essentially. But if you look at these, Google, Facebook, and all these companies, on top of that data aggregation, they have also, built applications on top of it, and applications to, and then of course operating systems, browsers, and then the devices and whatnot. So to some extent, from an end user point of view, these companies are known as consumer application companies, but essentially what they do is just analyze all this information at the back end and serve ads. So to some extent, you can even say these are data brokers masquerading as technology companies or application companies or whatever. And that's what it is. And then there are pure play data brokers. These are the ones that collect information from a lot of sources, and they don't try to masquerade as anything. They know what they do, and they just stick to it. I think that is the difference between the two. And they are the data brokers collect a lot of information and they sell it to each other, and it is all free flow of information. And one thing that happens is even there that industry it has hundreds, maybe thousands of data brokers, because it is also there is also specialization there. You have data brokers that are specialized in the real estate market, data brokers for financial market, and whatnot. Of course, there's if you look at the credit and whatnot, then that's an ocean itself. So there is the specialization within that, and it really goes deep.
Yeah, I just wanted to pop that up because there's this one article that actually talks about it, 18 industries that data brokers are focused in on. But I'm gonna go. Let's see. I want to go back to another piece here, but I don't want to like have a whole bunch of. All right, now I got it. All right, so I like this graphic because it's very easy to kind of follow what's going on here at a very high level. First of all, I had no idea that this whole data broker industry, it's a $200 billion a year industry. I mean, but then again, when you think about they got 3,000 pieces of data points on each one of us for the most part, I guess it does kind of make sense. 43% of data brokers allow consumers to opt out for free. Oh, how nice of them. They allow us to opt out for free. That means 57% either don't allow you to opt out, or what do they charge you for opting out? That's what is that irritating? $79 price for a list of 1,000 people with health conditions like anorexia, substance abuse, or depression. Everything is for sale, folks. If you got a health condition, it's going to be worth it to somebody else to make sure they know about your health condition so they can sell that to somebody else. $89 average value of one email address over time. Just for one email address. That's amazing.
So
that's a great deal. You're buying 1,000 for $79, and they're worth 89 a pop over time. That's a great ROI.
How much did Experian pay when they leaked our social security information? I'm sure it's not 89.
No, not at all.
I mean, you when you see these kind of numbers, and I just feel it's like a cavalier way that this data is being, talked about, because for them to throw around these kind of numbers, it's people's lives. I mean, people who have health conditions, a lot of folks would rather keep that private. They don't expect to go to the doctor and have to get a prescription filled, or might have to have certain kinds of use certain kind of therapy, and then come out and find out that the guy next door might actually have this information about you because he might have bought it. I mean, it's astounding how big an industry this is.
Look at it at multiple levels and multiple layers, right? Earlier we talked about data brokers, or in the context of network. They're at the network level, they're analyzing all this information, and they have that information out there. They are also collecting this information at the systems level, be it your operating system level, your device level, your whatever device you'll be using, your location data and whatnot is being aggregated there. It is also being aggregated at the application level. And when you say the payroll data or the websites you browse and whatnot, that data is being aggregated. And if you're using any of the systems, independent of that, your financial information, the payroll data is being aggregated because again, as we have seen in one of the graphics, 38% of Americans have the financial data in there. And there is bidirectional financial data. So that is the money you make through the payroll. And then the money you spend through the credit histories and whatnot. They have that data aggregated on the financial side. The same thing has happened on the properties, the real estate information. There are a lot of companies that aggregated data based on your county, property records and the taxes you pay on the property you own. All that information is also collected on that. Same thing, if you are into the education market, and there's a lot of information collected on that front as well. So no matter, and of course there is a health, which is a huge piece, a lot of sensitive information that is all collected. So all the key aspects of these pieces of data, you may think something is trivial, like the order you make at a restaurant. Well, that is one among 3,000 data points they collect, because they know your taste. And so I call this sensory surveillances. They have a better sense of your senses than you do. So they collect all of these pieces of information and aggregating it, and they are doing it at every level, and that is the scary part. And the thing is, they are doing it in a lot more advanced way, and we may not even know to what extent this is happening. And like, take the net flow thing we discussed, it just is leaked that they are doing it, but we don't know how long they have been doing it to. What else are they doing? In other words, these companies have built the operating system of surveillance, and they are aggregating all that piece of information across the board, and they're doing it globally, and nobody knows the depth of the information they have.
I mean, I think that's on purpose. That's why they stay in the shadows in terms of collecting the information and having these, I don't want to call them, backroom deals, but essentially that's kind of what they are, right? They're finding a way to double dip in a lot of cases. And it's not like they need to market to customers, because customers are just willingly giving up their information. I guess we're not even customers or users. We're just really free data points that are going into a system, because you're not even aware of what you're contributing to it. I mean, at least one of the graphics that Brent put up said that one company was paying like $8 a month for access to somebody's social media accounts and bank statements. At least you're getting paid for it. I guess that's one good thing. But if they're paying you $8, what do you think? What do you think? If they're paying you $8, what do you think they're making on you, right? Like, they're obviously making 2, 3, 4x. If they can afford to pay out just a small amount of $8, they're making a lot more. So, yeah, I mean, another thing that pops in my mind when it comes to this kind of tracking stuff that we probably could do a deeper dive on too as well is these Chrome browser extensions that generally get like unfettered access to your entire browsing history and every page you go on. I think like Honey is a big one, and there's a few others that do kind of like shopping deals or insert a coupon or something like that. But in the end, they might have a tie up with that vendor and get some discount, but really it's the amount of data that they're tracking, and you're just giving up and you have no idea. So
just look at that comment. That's funny, Jeff Fisher. That's great. Always count on Jeff for something. I wanted to, as you guys were talking, I thought it'd be pretty, kind of throw some information out there on just kind of the basic tactics and technologies that are being used to collect all this data. You got the cookies, which, everybody talks about. I don't know as many people know about the fingerprinting. Raju, I know you've talked about that before. Maybe you could touch on that a little bit.
Sure. In a lot of cases, you don't have to be browsing or providing your information for your information to be available. You may think you opened an incognito window and you're safe. But what these companies do is analyze other information that is available to fingerprint you and to pinpoint you. What kind of information, right? One, the kind of browser you use. That's something that is very, very relevant. Then the screen resolution. if you're using a monitor and whatnot. That's an additional data point that is pulled together. Then what kind of graphics cards you use, and that information, whenever it's available, is used, and it is pulled through various local means based on the content of the web page you visit and whatnot. And there are cases like the browser sometimes information is not available, but what they try to do is in the web page that you visit, they have some graphic rendering related details embedded on the website, and each browser renders a certain way. Based on that rendering pattern, they are able to get all that information and determine the browser use. So on top of it, there are several other tricks like how many extensions you have on your browser, what kind of extensions you have on the browser. If you narrow these down, there are 20, 30, or tens of such data points out there. When you are able to fingerprint this or get this information, metadata, and pull it together, you'll be surprised that users, or they will be able to pinpoint to you, the user, and of course where the traffic is coming from and whatnot will only help it. They'll be able to pinpoint you to you, the user, even though you may not have been logged in, you may have been on an incognito window or whatnot. And these are all the challenges with fingerprinting, and it's a deep topic in itself. But because they are gathering all this information, each of this information is one among those 3,000 data points they are talking about. What kind of extensions you have on your computer is one of those data points out there, and all of this is being pulled together to determine you. So no matter how you try to hide, they are ahead. So they caught you, all of us, I should say, and they have a lot of information. So it is no longer a cat and mouse game. They're way ahead of the game at this point.
I think one distinction that I guess we didn't go into detail, that 3,000 data point number, one, I guess it's maybe an estimation, but two, 3,000 data points is like the attributes, and then the amount of records per data point is a whole different story, right? So if we talk about maybe resolutions of a screen, right, that's one data point that could have 30 different records stored under it based on every device that I've accessed from, right? Every time I log into a service from a different IP address, maybe they know that, oh, this person's a traveler. They connected to like airport Wi-Fi, twice a week, every single week. So that 3,000 number is like still very small in scale of like the amount of actual, the amount of data actually that they have on you per each one of these, right? So yeah, that number I think underestimates how bad it really is.
Well, look at the number up right before it. Data for 500 million consumers. So that's 500 million people. And let's say that there's 3,000 data points for each of those 500 million people. That's a lot. I mean, I don't have my calculator right now, but that's a lot of data. And then look at the other number right above it, 23,000 servers collecting and analyzing consumer data. And that's going on like every day. So it's not just current data, or there's past historical, there's current, and who knows what they're going to find, because we're creating more data every day that goes on, because we're getting more digital stuff. The one number that's not on here, I forget which article I got this from, but I believe in 2020, every person, on average, every person generated 1.78 megabytes of digital data every minute. Just think about that.
And also, that number sounds small, but 1 point whatever megabytes of like text data is not small by any means. Like that's a lot of information that you can pack into like a data file for such a small, what someone would think is a small file size, but that's a lot of information per minute.
And some of this information that is collected, that 3,000 data points, in a lot of cases, if you look at 500 million, in a lot of cases, these data points are collected by companies that may not be in that country, which means how will the local governments feel when their citizen information is collected by technology companies that are not from that country and without their permission? And that is the reason we are seeing regulations across the board, across various countries in the world, because they recognize the abuse with these. And yeah, I think we'll unfortunately see these virtual walls go up.